So, we found ourselves in Psychedelics and Quantum Physics, hosted by the Portland Psychedelic Society. My name is Max Kellerman. I am the Executive Director for the Portland Psychedelic Society, so I'm very grateful for you all to show up and support us in this way. This means a lot to us. Okay, for tonight's event, let's pivot to the panel. We have George Weissmann here. George Weissmann is a PhD theoretical physicist with a focus on foundations in philosophy and implications of quantum physics. He graduated from the University of California, Berkeley with eminent physicists Geoffrey and Henry Stapp, then continued his research in high-energy physics at the Federal Polytechnic University in Zürich, Switzerland. In the 70s, he co-founded the Fundamental Fysiks Group, which met weekly at the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory and is credited by historian of physics David Kaiser with re-invigorating physics by investigating fundamental questions. He's also a practitioner and student of Buddhism and Taoism since 1980 and has built bridges between the science and spirituality. He's worked with groups practicing collective consciousness and inter-paradigmatic communication and contributed to the emergence of a coherent philosophy and worldview grounded in consciousness, the so-called quantum paradigm, which integrates science, parapsychology, philosophy, and spirituality. This is George. Our moderator tonight is Adriana Voss-Andre. There is a connection. Adriana serves on the board of directors for both our 501c3, the Portland Psychedelic Society, as well as our newly formed 501c4, the Portland Psychedelic Society Action Fund, which is helping spearhead the policy advocacy efforts that we're doing at City Council and beyond. She has a background in climate change, community building, and dedicated protector of animal rights, and just an all-around amazing person. So I'm going to pass it off to you to kick off the panel.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack in each of these presentations, but I'll now move it to you, George.
Psychedelics and quantum physics. You might wonder how these two seemingly disparate topics are related and what the importance of their connection might be for us. I will begin by relating how they came together for me, and then describe the quantum paradigm and show why engaging with it might be important and productive for psychedelic practitioners. My personal story can serve as an illustration. I studied physics because I firmly believed that it offered the best way of discovering the nature of reality. I was a true and passionate believer in rationality, scientism, and in classical physics and its principles, what we call the classical paradigm that Julian talked about. A dreary, hopeless view for us, but beautiful and exciting to me then in its intellectual simplicity and clarity. Matter, and therefore the whole universe, is insentient, and everything, including life itself, is a random process. So there's no meaning or structure other than that that emerges from statistics. No inherent meaning or purpose. The universe is basically a hostile or indifferent place. Consciousness is an epiphenomenon, a side product of brain function, and ends with death. And it's profane in the sense that there's no room for spirit, divinity, sacredness, mystery, spirituality. So that was where I was at that time. Then in the mid-70s, I discovered the psychedelics. I was just about to begin my PhD work at the University of California, Berkeley. My first psychedelic journey, undertaken out of curiosity, was a full-blown mystical experience and made an indelible mark on me. I experienced the whole as consciousness, as alive, as miraculous and living. Actually, it was ineffable. It cannot be described. And it was truly life-changing. It completely shattered my materialistic worldview. When I came out of my altered state, I was in a magical trance for days, and then the questioning began. I could not figure out how I could not doubt the veracity and reality of my experience, as it was as Julian said, it was more real than real. But how could the insights from that experience be compatible with the scientific worldview that I had become wedded to? How could science and spirit, with their seemingly completely different takes on the world, be brought into harmony? I lived in and struggled with that question intensively. Just then, by synchronicity, I met my future thesis advisors, renowned out-of-the-box thought leaders in quantum physics, and I sensed that in that direction lay the solution to my paradox. Opened wide by my psychedelic experience, I became a student and practitioner of Buddhism and Taoism, which I continued throughout my life. I concentrated my research on the foundations, philosophy, and implications of quantum theory, which together with my involvement with wisdom traditions laid the foundation for my life mission, which is building a bridge between science and spirituality. This work culminated in what I came to call the quantum paradigm. Both these seemingly so different modalities, as I will explain, support one another as avenues to human transformation. Transformation involves a fundamental paradigm shift, which does not come about easily. It generally requires overcoming fierce and stubborn resistance based on many, many layers of conditioning and habits and a deep existential fear. It is as if paradigms were entities in their own right, equipped with an immune system for self-preservation. So a paradigm is defined as a structuring of personal reality. A structuring of personal reality. If it is embodied, it shapes the whole functioning of every aspect of our mind, mostly unconsciously. It governs the way we think, we experience, how we organize our sensations, how we interpret our experience, and our perceptions of the world. It defines our values, shapes our emotions, in fact, everything about us. Therefore, embodied paradigms shifts transform our reality. On the other hand, a paradigm can merely be conceptually framed, like, for example, a teaching, a philosophy, or a theory, which is the most common usage of that word. Then it just influences our thinking process. So a conceptual paradigm shift is often not profoundly transformational. So the problem is, how do you embody a conceptual paradigm? Paradigms are built on sometimes conscious but more often unconscious presuppositions, that is, unexamined and unchallenged assumptions, which thereby become operational as our truths. Even when made conscious, they tend to appear unchallengeable because they seem so obviously true. Einstein called them common sense. That is part of the paradigm self-defense. So most people are not fully aware of the central role that especially their embodied paradigm plays. They may naively believe that the world simply is the way they see it, rather than being constructed and shaped by their paradigm. But nothing could be further from the truth, and the simple illustration is that a few micrograms of psychedelic facilitates a radical, though temporary, transformation of our paradigm, and therefore the very way the world appears to us. So, as I said, conceptual paradigms can become embodied and thus become transformative. And how does that happen? It happens through practices. I'll give the example of Buddhism. In Buddhism, you have view teachings, the sutras and shastras, and those can serve as the basis of Buddhist practices, such as contemplation of sacred texts, meditation, chanting and mantras, etc., etc. The effect of such practices can be transformational and is strongly determined by the view teaching which informs them. Otherwise, just going through a practice like a meditation without the view teaching doesn't work the same way. Different view teachings can end up having different effects with the same practices. So practice and view go hand in hand, and they're both needed in order to effectuate a transformation. Analogously, quantum practices, so that's the embodiment of the theoretical quantum paradigm, may consist of an imaginative contemplation of an experiential immersion into quantum principles, for example, through Einstein-like thought experiments or other practices I have no time to elaborate on. A psychedelically induced transient paradigm shift may gradually stabilize and become an enduring part of us if it is supported by repetition and by such intentional practices. And the quantum practices I just mentioned are suitable for this purpose, especially for practitioners still under the spell of the classical paradigm, which may be most of us, including myself. In other words, it's opening up a little bit, but it's very hard to get rid of the core. Quantum paradigm is verbally expressed worldview which results from distilling the quintessential and experientially relevant insights of quantum physics. This quantum paradigm can be embodied through quantum practices and then becomes more than just an intellectual worldview. When engaged in this way, it becomes transformative and a spiritual practice in its own right. So to say, we become quantum beings in a quantum world. Psychedelics can give us a preliminary taste of what this is like. And so there's a synergy between psychedelics and quantum practices. We can discern how quantum paradigm can be synergistically combined with psychedelics to bring about transformation. The quantum paradigm serves to give a context to and make sense of, as well as stabilize and enhance the more temporary transformational effects of psychedelics alone. And conversely, psychedelic experiences can give a novice a taste of quantum reality, like as it did for me. An important benefit of this quantum approach is that it directly challenges and disempowers the hold that the classical paradigm has over us, including its nihilistic reductionism, materialism, and determinism, and its alienating separation between the self and the world, between each of us and other beings. Hence, the classical paradigm inherently delegitimizes psychedelic experience as being out of touch with reality and simply the product of a drug-incapacitated brain. I mean, that's the only way, if you really believe in the classical paradigm, that's the only way you can interpret psychedelic experience. So if you're still under the spell of at least, or influenced by the scientifically obsolete yet still predominant classical worldview, it works against rather than supports the benefits from the psychedelic experience and stunts your transformational potential. On the other hand, the quantum paradigm, which is the most cutting-edge scientific worldview, abolishes the split between inner and outer, between yourself and the world, and overcomes your apparent separateness from other beings and from nature. So it is naturally able to reconcile your psychedelic experience with the nature of reality. Therefore, and this is kind of a summary of that, immersing oneself in the quantum paradigm is precisely the perfect antidote for the psychedelic practitioner. It enables us to recognize materialist reductionist scientism as a superstition it is, and it so disempowers it. So what are the main features of the quantum paradigm as they pertain to our interests? Quantum physics developed a century ago in its current form, originally to explain atomic and subatomic phenomena, which classical physics failed completely to describe. It allowed physicists to predict the outcome of all known phenomena and outcomes of any experience. It's an extremely successful theory, as well as revolutionized technology. And it completely superseded classical physics. That needs to be said because it's sometimes misconceived that quantum physics is the physics of the small and classical physics is the physics of the big. No, quantum physics is the physics at every scale. So what are some of the novel features relevant to psychedelic practitioners that distinguish quantum physics from classical physics? I'll mention just three. First, quantum physics does not refer to an objective reality, namely material systems objectively existing and having set properties. Such an objective reality is actually not compatible with quantum behavior. It cannot exist. Instead, quantum physics describes how an observer experiences and measures a physical system. So the observer is an essential part of quantum physics. It's not just about the objective reality, it's about who experiences and how. Subject and object are both essential, yet intimately connected elements of quantum physics. Secondly, quantum systems are holistic. They form a whole which cannot be considered as consisting of separate interacting parts. Ultimately, the whole universe is one whole. This feature is called entanglement, and since the observers are also quantum systems, they too are part of the whole. At a fundamental level, there is no separation between us all. Despite appearances, we are one, and this is a crucial world-changing insight, maybe the most important insight, practically insight, that especially once it's embodied and we actually feel that way, that we're one. Every observation is actually the whole observing itself. The dichotomy between inner and outer disappears. By the same token, the classical split between purported objective reality and our experience of objective reality, in other words, between noumenon and phenomenon in Kantian terms, is basically obsolete. Thirdly, the dichotomy between active and passive is abolished. In particular, a measurement is not a passive observation of what already was the case before the measurement. Rather, it is a creative act which actually creates the state of affairs that is measured. The outcome of a measurement is generally not determined in conventional quantum physics. By that I mean the quantum physics before the third quantum revolution, which I'll shortly mention. The outcome of a measurement is considered random, and we can only calculate the probability of an individual outcome, not which outcome actually occurs. To find an interpretation that works is very important, and it was frustrated, that search was frustrated for nearly a century after quantum physics was developed in 1926, and it's only nearly a century later that we started to have workable interpretations. There were interpretations before, but they were never very successful, and they never achieved consensus amongst physicists, partly because they're in one way or another still wedded to the, and in different ways, still wedded to the classical paradigm. This led various prominent quantum physicists to pronounce that no one really understands quantum physics, including themselves. And this in spite of universal agreement about how to use quantum physics to calculate the outcome of quantum experiments. So then the second, in about 30 years ago, the second quantum revolution, which is the information revolution, came about, and it began to remove the obstacle to understanding the nature of quantum reality. It offered an avenue for a quantum paradigm. By now it has gained the adherence of most researchers, this information interpretation, as well as giving rise to formidable technological innovation. According to the information interpretation of quantum physics, quantum reality consists of bits of information. This is where most quantum physicists are still in their understanding of quantum reality. But the objection I have toward this is that the way they define information is abstract and makes no reference to the actual and real context of information, which is experience or consciousness. So that brings us to the current situation, the third quantum revolution, which is the consciousness revolution, which recognizes information as merely the discriminating or distinction-making aspect of consciousness. But there's so much more to consciousness than information, namely experience itself, qualia, will, intention, emotion, agency, and so on. It turns out that we need to consider these other aspects of consciousness to properly account for the anomalous result of recent experiments which violate the predictions of conventional quantum physics and confirm the unavoidable need for a consciousness-based quantum paradigm. For example, one kind of experiment proves conclusively that human intention can influence what was by conventional quantum physics assumed to be a totally random outcome, leading to a departure from the statistical predictions of quantum theory. In other words, quantum theory does not this is a first in the history of quantum theory that there are experiments which defy the predictions of quantum theory. According to these results, conventional quantum physics only yields correct predictions in the absence of biasing intention. In so doing, it falsifies the assumption of quantum randomness, and with it all the interpretations of quantum physics proposed till now, and provides compelling evidence for the third quantum revolution, namely the consciousness nature of quantum reality. Philosophically, the third quantum revolution confirms the profound insights of ancient wisdom traditions which had a consciousness or awareness ontology, which was then arrived at through meditative spiritual insight. In my view, the quantum paradigm based on fundamental consciousness, which I now just call simply the quantum paradigm, finally sheds light on the true nature of quantum reality. It has extremely significant implications. Some of its practical implications are mind over matter effects like psychokinesis, remote healing, the law of attraction, miracles, namely bringing about extremely improbable but possible events just through intention, ESP, the placebo effect, synchronicity, collective consciousness, the survival of consciousness after death, and much more. All these phenomena which have been known for a long time and have been well established and yet widely rejected because they defied the paradigm of the time. So finally, the ontology of quantum paradigm is, and this is in one sentence, all appearance, including the appearance of material reality, space and time, individual minds and collective minds, all arises out of fundamental awareness or consciousness and partakes of the nature or is of the nature of awareness. A cute aphorism that expresses this is fundamental awareness is, and there is nothing but fundamental awareness. So in summary, for quantum ontology also gives context and legitimacy to psychedelic experience. If you are moved to familiarize yourself more deeply with the quantum paradigm and allow it to transform your worldview, I highly recommend reading and practicing the book Quantum Revelations by the next speaker, Paul. And global transformation is essential now. That's the last point. Why is transformation crucially important, both personally and globally? Julian has explained the degree to which we have been conditioned by the classical paradigm and what a devastating and destructive effect it has had on us, our society, our psychological, ethical, spiritual, social, and ecological health and sustainability. It is, in my opinion, not exaggerated to say that our very survival as a species, not to mention our thriving and fulfilling our destiny, depends on a global radical paradigm shift in a historically very short time. And the guided use of psychedelics can play an important role in this.
Thank you all so much. I have so many questions, but I want to open the conversation with our audience, and I might interject some questions in between.
I was really taken with the idea of ideas having a consciousness, of a collective idea kind of becoming an entity that exists, that has an immune reaction. And I've been trying to grasp with our seeming return to conservative politics and fascism and that sort of thing. And it occurred to me that that might be an immune reaction to the awakening of quantum reality. That this static, fear-based consciousness is afraid of that sugar thing happening. And what do we do with that? Like, how do we counter an idea that has consciousness?
I wanted to just mention that, give a few examples of that, of this immune effect, that this immune protection that paradigms have. For instance, the psychedelics is a good example. There was a moment of flowering with Aldous Huxley and so on, and then immediately, when it started to take hold, it became demonized and finally illegalized, and stayed that way for many years. Similar things happened with parapsychology. For instance, on Wikipedia, there are skeptics constantly, completely raising anything about telepathy or anything about like that is immediately wiped clean. So there is that, and I could bring many more examples. There is that. That's a manifestation of this immune system, of this resistance that takes many forms against salutary changes.
It sounds like we're at a good transition for some online questions.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if there's online.
Yeah, we've got a few. This is from Greg Eldridge. How can we begin to embody the emerging quantum paradigm in our everyday lives? So kind of a similar question to earlier. And continued, in what ways might this shift in worldview influence our ability to manifest what we desire? And are there specific techniques that align more effectively with this perspective?
Yes. There is, for instance, the issue of law of attraction, where you can utilize this by focusing on something that you want in a particular way, which is like it's already happened. It's not just you idly wish for it, but you believe in it, and you can help to synchronistically bring it about. That's an example. There are trainings. There's a book by David Baer, for example, which about changing mind, in which you focus on your subconscious or unconscious beliefs, and he points out that they actually, through shaping your thoughts, which shape your emotions, which shape your actions, which shape the outcomes, which gives you feedback, which reinforces the original thing, you're caught in a loop, and he shows a way out of that loop by showing ways that you can truly change. It's not enough to say, I believe something else. You have to really believe it, and that's not easy when you have accumulated through your whole lifetime evidence that this negative belief that you had is actually true.
I've got a couple more for you. Rebecca Gear asked, do you see quantum theory, especially non-locality or coherence, as offering a possible scientific framework for understanding consciousness, particularly in non-ordinary or intuitive states?
I would formulate it the opposite way. You can understand non-locality on the basis that everything arises out of consciousness. Consciousness is one.
To all panelists, if you had the chance to address the average layperson on a large scale, what's your elevator pitch to embrace or begin the process of discovering the quantum paradigm?
I personally have developed a practice which is having an object and becoming one with it and then moving it at a distance. And in doing that, I have immediate feedback how well I'm connecting with it, how it's not out there, it's actually I'm working with my own experience of it rather than with some object out there. And the more you can do that, the more it works.
I want to just thank you again for this fascinating conversation. I would love to keep going, but I know we're at time. And thank you all, audience, too, for participating in this really mind-blowing discussion.
Yeah, let's join you. Yeah, everybody, please give a round of applause for Julie and George, Paul and Adriana. All right, thank you all.